All right, so this episode is with Chris Linger. Chris was in the Navy for 27 years, and man, he and his wife. They have three businesses. One is real estate, one is a coaching business, and the third one is a virtual assistant business. Man, it was awesome, and I had talked about this on the interview a little bit, and before and after the interview with Chris, but he and his wife just have so much content that they put out all the time. You'll hear in the interview that they're on Clubhouse and they do webinars and meetups and just so much content that it's really impressive. A lot of people in this business, they're mom and pops and don't have a ton of content, but they're just doing as much content as they can, helping as many people as they can, either invest passively or mentoring entrepreneurs. And so it's just really awesome. Love this conversation with Chris, and it's an episode you definitely don't want to miss. Thanks for listening. Welcome to Passive Investors Playbook. I'm your host, Charlie Hardage. In each episode, we'll sit down with successful people that turn to real estate to build and grow their wealth. We do a deep dive into why they chose real estate and what makes it so attractive to them. We explore why people in their industry could also benefit from passively investing in real estate. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced investor, a doctor or a professional athlete, love your job or hate your job, our show is here to help you build a profitable real estate portfolio while maximizing your free time and minimizing stress. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn from some of the best in the business. Welcome to Passive Investors Playbook. All right, thanks for listening to the Passive Investors Playbook. My name is Charlie Hardage, and today I am joined by Chris Linger. Chris spent over 27 years in the Navy and is now retired. He is a full-time real estate professional and apartment syndicator. Chris is a mentor to hundreds of aspiring investors, and they do so through amazing education. I want to get into that later, Chris, but we were talking about it pre-show. I love all the articles and everything that you and your wife are doing in real estate and helping others. Over the last 3 years, Chris and his wife have done 6 small multifamily deals and transitioned to properties greater than 100 units purchased. They have done 7 syndications overall. He's been in real estate since 2006, and his superpower is networking, asset management, and underwriting. Their current portfolio is over 3,000 units. As active partners, they're in multiple Texas markets, as well as Kentucky and North Carolina. They've passively invested in Pennsylvania and Arizona, as well as the other states that I just mentioned. Chris, thanks so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you and talk to you. Thank you so much for your service to our country. 27 years, that's a long time. But thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. I really appreciate it. It's
Yeah,
been a great growth opportunity. So
good. Man, yeah, 27 years. That's awesome. I was only in 5 years, and that aged me a lot. So, man, yeah, thanks for being here, Chris. Do you mind sharing with the audience a little bit more about you and your company?
absolutely. So 2017, my wife actually started the Up Plex brand that we call it with one company as she bought into starting to buy investment properties. We actually met around that same time, just shortly after she opened all that and had contracted her first 2 properties, developed a relationship, and decided to make this more of a brand. We were buying um, our own small multifamily portfolio. We ended up getting to as many as 35 apartments with quadplexes, eightplex, a couple of single families and duplexes. And our big thing was that I was active duty at the time. She was a reservist, and we didn't want to be in charge of other people's money with the potential to deploy and lose access to internet and potentially not even come home.
Yeah.
So we made that agreement that yes, we wanted to go to syndications, but we were going to wait until one of us got out. And it just happened that I dropped paperwork in December of 19. retired in September of 20, and we rolled right into the syndication world. That's essentially our backstory. And then as we grew, we developed, we broadened our scope a little bit. We diversified some. We're in mobile home parks, self-storage. We have a couple of notes, mortgage notes that we hold. We did some seller financing. And in some ways, you can say our last property that we purchased, it was meant to be a BRRRR, buy, renovate, refinance, and rent. Somebody came to us about 9 months into ownership and said, "Hey, would you guys be interested in selling this thing?" And it was just the right time, and we were just doing that conversion over to syndication. So it was a great opportunity for us to roll money and be able to start doing more in the syndication side. The other business that you see listed is the Accelerated Biz Coaching, and that is our virtual assistant agency, which grew out of our growth in syndications. It helped us to achieve more faster. And then we're also 10X certified business coaches, so we can coach on a bunch of different aspects of business, which syndications are a business, regardless of what some people say. It is truly a business. Each of these properties is an individual business, and we look at it with a different mindset in that regard.
Man, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so Up Plex was started in 2017. That's when you met your wife around that time, and she had started it. And you came in. Were you already interested in real estate at that time, or were you like, what the heck are you doing?
It was actually one of the conversations that was very easy for us to have.
Okay.
I already had a single family home. Being military, I bought into the concept of buy a house in the locations where you were stationed. As you move out, keep the house, rent it out. I only grabbed that philosophy in one of the last stateside duty stations that I had, where it was feasible for me. And then when we met, it was a conversation that I was able to have. We ended up a year and a half after meeting, we ended up investing together into some quadplexes down in the Austin area, which is where we're based out of. And so that became an outlier that we sold in 2020, actually.
Very cool. Okay, so you're based in Austin. You had some homes from your time in the Navy. Pretty easy conversation. If your partner's investing in real estate, or at least interested in real estate, it's a lot easier than if they're not interested in it, right?
Absolutely.
And I know a lot of people, a lot of listeners, they have that. It's like, hey, this is great, but how do I get my spouse on board? And you were blessed where you didn't have to have that conversation. Your conversations were more around the what to go after, not why we should go after them. So that's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah. And so you were active duty until I think it was September 2020. That's when you retired. So you spent the last almost 3 years going after mobile home parks, self-storage, apartments, obviously. You mentioned seller notes. Can you talk about what a seller note is?
So when a buyer comes along and they either don't have the money for a down payment, or they want to, I guess, bring the value of the property up a little more, they may ask the seller to finance a portion of the property. Sometimes they ask them to finance the whole thing with a little bit of a regular down payment. In our case, we wanted to pay off the mortgage note that we had. We wanted to get some of our equity back out and then put it back to work. And then we were willing to leave some money behind as a seller finance down payment. Now, it's illegal to, or without being upfront with the lender, it would be illegal to do a note on the same property that you're trying to sell. That wouldn't be appropriate. So the people that we did this with were previous other investors in the area that we knew. We knew they were successful at what they're doing, and we knew that they had a good portfolio. So we went to some of their other properties, looked at those, and we did an actual mortgage note as a second place lien on those properties, on one of those properties, gave them the money for that note that they were signing over with us. And then the next day they went to the closing table for the property they were buying from us, and they give us back the money.
Very
So
cool.
it worked out really nice. The money was out of our account. In most cases, it was out of our account maybe 3 days and then back in. And now we get a mortgage payment from them every month for each of those properties.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, I know that that's another strategy that people are looking at, and had someone on. I interviewed someone. We recorded it. Haven't released the podcast yet, but he's into private lending, and I think one of the things that he had mentioned was yeah. I mean, everyone wants to be the bank, right? And I think there's so many benefits of being the lender in this case, or maybe not the primary lender, but at least a lender. And I know that's something that you're doing. You have a few of those, I believe, right? A few
We
notes.
do. We have 5 where we sold our portfolio. We actually have one of our joint venture um, storage facilities. We are the bank for that one. We
Cool.
had sold a property, and 3 days before closing on the storage, the bank came back and said, "Oh yeah, we just noticed none of you live in that state, so we're not gonna lend on this." And like the deal was about to fall apart. And I looked at Maricela and I was like, "We have the money in the bank to do this, and we'll give them favorable terms because it's our deal." And so we gave them really favorable terms, and we went to the closing table, took care of everything in a few days. We already knew the due diligence because we were already involved with the deal, right?
Yeah,
So it worked out very well, and that's been a good opportunity for us all around.
that's awesome. Um, and then so mention the seller notes. You sold a home that you had intended on keeping, but someone gave you a pretty good offer. So you ended up selling that and just were able to use that money to buy some more apartments and go that route. And then you also mentioned that you have a virtual assistant company and you are 10x business coach certified, which is super cool. And so if you're not watching on the YouTube feed, Chris has 3 logos in his background, and that's what he's talking about there. So very cool. So you were in the Navy 27 years. How'd you get into real estate? Was it that mentality that you subscribe to, just about buying a home at a duty station? Is that your first endeavor into real estate?
I had heard about that concept, but I never really processed the whole thing. And to be honest, kind of an accidental landlord is really what happened. Moved out of Pensacola, Florida in 2007 as things were crashing. And so we were unable to get rid of the home, held on to it, trying to sell it for another 6 or 8 months, not paying attention. And then finally said, you know what, we're going to rent this thing out, at least get the mortgage covered and a little bit more. And caught the bug. As soon as I started seeing those checks coming in, I was like, hold on, wait, there's something here. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until 17 when I met Maricela that I saw the bigger scheme of it all, like not scheme, I don't, that's the wrong word, I guess.
Yeah, the big
Uh,
picture.
yeah, I saw the bigger picture and the long-term wins that can happen from that. And then when we sold our portfolio, as we transitioned into syndications, we tripled our money on almost everything.
Golly.
Almost everything tripled in value. So tripled our equity that was in there.
Wow, that's amazing. It's the accidental landlord. I think it's a funny term because it's not necessarily, an accident, but at the same time, there's been so many people, myself included, that become accidental landlords. And then you see the power of, oh my gosh, there's something to this, right? Like you saw the checks coming in, and then when you ended up selling everything, you basically tripled your money, tripled the equity. And you mentioned something, Chris, that you heard the concept about buying the property at each duty station, but you didn't really understand it. You didn't understand why. It's like, yeah, I've heard stuff like that before, like have your money work for you, don't work for your money. It's like you hear that, but you don't really process it or understand it fully. But then when you go back and think about it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's what that means. And I think part of that too is just the mind, your mindset, my mindset, everyone's mindset just has to slowly evolve. But when it does, it just clicks. And so I love that you became an accidental landlord and it paid off in dividends over the years.
over the years.
Yeah.
I will say that it is a second job. It is a lot of extra liability, and it's what makes a lot of what we were doing. It led us right into that path of syndications for the active side. However, not everybody wants to do that. Some people just love the stuff they do. They love the work they do, and they think, "Oh, I hear real estate's a great thing. Let me go buy a house." And that's to us now, we're like, "Man, that's crazy." Because you can get into these opportunities to double your money in 3 to 5 years in general, um, and for less money than what you can buy a house for right now. Even if you were going to move into it, 3% down on some stuff, it's pretty close to what the same investment amount would be. And it's a way syndications offer an opportunity that a lot of people did they wouldn't even maybe they don't even qualify for a home loan, especially the special programs.
Yeah.
So it
I
was a great position to be able to help others as well.
Man, I love that you said that being an accidental landlord is an extra job. And you and I have probably talked to hundreds of people in the syndication business, whether it's mobile home parks, self-storage, apartments, whatever it is. Most of those people started in single family. And
Mhm.
like me, I did not like being a landlord, whether it was accidental or on purpose. And that is actually one of the biggest reasons I got into multifamily syndication. And it wasn't even the active side. I started investing passively because I'm like, wait, are you kidding me? I can invest passively. I don't have to be an expert in this, and I can, put my money into this syndication pool with experts, and they do the work. This is unbelievable. And so, a lot of people have said when they got into the passive side of things, the paychecks weren't much bigger or much smaller in the syndication space than they were in the single family, but now they weren't doing any work, right?
Mhm.
The cash flow is about the same, but now they get all this time back, and it was a big stress reliever for them. So I love that you brought up, the single family side was basically an extra job, and that's true, especially if you have more than one single family home. If you have multiple homes, it's several hours a month that you're working at it for. Um,
Absolutely. And the fact that you're the one getting the phone calls, even if you have a property manager, it's a smaller level and they call you for everything. You're always worried about having a tenant in there. And it's just nice to, because we're also passively invested in about 1,000 apartments that
yeah,
are included in our 3,000 total. And it is it's so much easier. You literally are spending 20, 30 minutes to look through the financial report for the month and maybe ask some questions if you need to.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a far easier process to be passive.
Love that. Yep. I agree. I'm sure you and your team sends out on the deals that you're active in, you send emails out every month just with the numbers and updates and things like that. I go through my email and look at that, once a month, and 15, 20 minutes, and probably a couple times a year I'll spend an hour just going and looking at the original pitch deck to see, okay, where are we based on what they had initially said. And a lot of times I'm surprised its numbers are better than what they said they would be. So
Yeah,
um, that's pretty much all the time I spend on my passive deals, which is great. And so you got into real estate by the accidental landlord. um, you know Being in the Navy for 27 years, I'm sure you had so much that you could do when you got out, when you retired. Why'd you stick with real estate as opposed to something else?
we had already developed that real estate portfolio. And like I said, it was a whole nother full-time job, on top of our regular work. And when I retired, they actually they offered me, oftentimes the military won't let you change your mind. But because of COVID, they came back and said, hey, if you want to stick around, there's no jobs out there, We're like, no, we have more than we're good. Like that, my supervisors knew that I was doing real estate. And to be honest, they had the nickname for me, Chris Trump. Just give me a hard time because you know how that is. Can't let stuff like that go. But uh, in the overall, just getting into the depth that we did with our portfolio completely changed my life and my trajectory.
Yeah,
Finding the mentors, going to some of these courses and events, it just changes your mindset. And then listening to the podcasts. That was the other, is that we were consistently listening to podcasts and educating ourselves that much further. So the trajectory that I thought I was going to have, which was to go work in a hospital closer to my kids. I've got three daughters and they're all in different areas of the country. And I figured I'd go do a contract for 3 or 4 months at each place and get to spend time with each of them. Now we get to go visit them when we're doing events, when we're going to see our grandbabies, when we're like, we can just go and see them whenever we need to or want to. And because syndications, the active side of syndications gives you freedom of location, as well as freeing up your time. It gives you that freedom of location as long as you have somebody in the area, which we always have a property manager that's on site because we're buying more than 100 units with each property. But we also usually have one of our general partners is within a half an hour to an hour of the property as well. So if something needed immediate attention, we can send out a partner to go take a look at it. They can report back if we're the asset managers or maybe they're the asset managers. So it's that's been ideal as far as life-changing opportunities.
Yeah, man, I love that story that, you were in the Navy for 27 years. You had probably dozens and dozens of amazing opportunities ahead of you, but they all required you to continue working for someone else where you wouldn't get that freedom of location. Maybe you'd have a little bit of freedom of location because you could pick up contracts, but you didn't have that freedom of time, right? You would have been essentially working for your money at that point. And instead, because you already had this real estate portfolio, probably going on 2-3 years, maybe 4 years at that point, you already saw the power of real estate and said, I don't have to work for anyone except me and my investors. And I get to choose when I work and where I work and how long I work. And so you're still able to see your family and travel, but you get to do it when you want and not 2 weeks a year or whatever your employer says. So love that. What would you say, Chris, that makes real estate so attractive to you?
Man, like I said, it's that freedom of time and freedom of location. We get to go do the things that we want to do, and we can spend a couple hours a day working on the real estate side of things, and still get a full day's worth of work or a full week's worth of work done. That if you were working for somebody else, you wouldn't have those opportunities. The places we visited, the family time that we've been able to have, especially with being military for 27 years, you don't go home very often. You don't get to
Right.
go see family a whole lot because you're busy doing other stuff. And like you said, 2 weeks maybe. And to be honest, when I go back home to upstate New York, probably within a week, you're like, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah.
It's a little slower pace, but still enjoy it. But real estate has that ability to grow wealth. It has the ability to save on taxes, and it's something that we've been doing for the last 7 years now, 6 years now, more full time, consciously and purposefully investing. That it's it's really, we've gotten our education and we're, I guess I'll say, higher level in the system of real estate to be able to be successful and make sure that we can do those tasks rather well,
Yeah.
as opposed to some other career field.
I love that. So freedom of location, freedom of time, builds wealth, save on taxes. It sounds like you had a pretty clear action plan of what you were going to do when you got out of the military. You were already working on creating that financial independence, that financial freedom, that time freedom. And I love that because I do think even as a passive investor, um, achieving financial freedom is totally attainable, but you do need to be focused on building that plan, taking action, and going after it. I know I want to kind of transition, Chris, because I know before the interview, before we started recording, I actually said that Well, first off, to the audience, everyone needs to be on Chris's email database. So we'll plug his website and maybe his email or ways that you can connect with Chris, because the education that they send out, the emails that they send out, I get probably hundreds of emails a month from other people like myself and Chris. And I think that he and his wife have the best educational emails that come out. It's not spam, but it's all different ways to learn. You guys are, I mean, killing it in the content game. So anyway, wanted to get that out there too for the audience. I told you that before the show, Chris, but will you talk about maybe ways, because in the bio, I brought up that you are mentoring hundreds of aspiring investors. Will you talk about how else you're doing that?
So we are in, I think it's 4 different communities that we participate with, whether they're paid mentorship, paid masterminds, or a real estate club, or there's just a mentoring club that we're part of, that we're kind of a resource in there, I guess I'll say. And then on top of that, we do Clubhouse every Wednesday night, 7 Central. We're in Clubhouse with Maricela's room, passive investors room. And once a month, on the third Thursday of the month, we do a meetup, a virtual meetup, where we try to bring in a vendor or somebody else, third party, to just kind of enlighten folks as to what these people do. Why do you want this on your property? What do you need to know about these guys? And sometimes I mean, we've done 401k, self-directed 401k people, all the way to water conservation and lenders and stuff like that. So it's a big, broad range, because we are in so many different groups and such large networks. We meet a lot of people, and we're always willing to share information with folks. And that's our clubhouse is literally like, we're there to do Q&A. If
Oh,
you have
wow.
a question about real estate, you have a question about passively investing, you don't understand something about syndications, please come ask a question. I'm not afraid to say, I'm not sure about that, but let me find out. I'm okay with that too. But 9 times out of 10, it's pretty straightforward questions. And the other thing is, we'll go in there prepared in case people aren't ready to ask questions and they just want some information. We'll go in with whatever was on the topic of the week, or something that's given us trouble, or some little highlight topic for now, that we heard about in the last week or two. And so that's pretty much the ways that we throw that out there. And then we also have our business coaching business as well, to help you grow your business if you're looking to get the marketing, the sales, and things like that. And again, I told you earlier, syndications is a business,
Yep.
and so that's where I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that we put good content out there, because that's the goal, right? You want good information out there so people can rely on you, and they look at you in a different light than they look at somebody else who's, like you said, maybe sending 2 or 3 emails for the year, and you don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so we like to connect with everybody as much as we can, but we know that there's only one of us. There's many, many, many in the email database, and we still want them to know what's going on with us, so that maybe at some point our goals change, not our goals, but our trajectories aren't the same, or maybe they feel like we're pushing off in a different direction, and they can reach back to us and have good conversations, and we know that we're helping them grow along the way.
Yeah.
So that's really, before I retired, I was in charge of a mentoring program in the military. And that was one of the things that, as we moved into this stuff, we wanted to make sure that we continue that kind of philosophy of the military having, you look to mentors 1 or 2 levels above you, and you grab somebody below you and you bring them along, right? You help develop them so that they can hopefully, and ultimately, like, to me, the biggest compliment is when somebody that we've talked to started their journey, that they pass us. Like, that's the ultimate compliment, because that is how it should be. When mentoring happens, you should be able to move through that same path that that person took faster, because it's beaten down. They're keeping you from doing some of those mistakes that maybe you went through. So
Yeah. Man, I love that so much, because especially in our business, Chris, and not even the multifamily side, but just syndication side and investing in real estate. there's so much that can happen. And you brought up with your webinars, and I didn't write it down, but I remember you mentioned water conservation and just kind of bringing in these other vendors and experts, because just because you're the expert doesn't mean people have to hear from you all the time, right? And so you're bringing in your network, which allows aspiring investors to say, wow, like they're just providing so much value. Why would I not want to get to know them? And that's what I said, all the emails that you guys send out. I didn't even know about the clubhouse that you guys are on I think you said every week.
Every Wednesday,
Yeah.
yeah, 7 Central.
I mean, you guys just have so many resources on all this content, all these different social media platforms and webinars and emails and all that. It's amazing the type of content and everything that you're putting out. So I didn't question you when you were mentioning, helping hundreds of aspiring investors, but now it's obviously completely apparent to me, and probably the audience too, on just everything that you guys have your hands in and how you're helping. And I like what you said about when regardless of where you are in your career, you always want to look ahead of you 1 or 2 steps, because that's where you want to go. But you can't forget to take a hand below you, because you were there at one point, right? And
Absolutely.
you know how hard it is, or what those people are struggling with, because you were there probably not too long ago, but you're helping ease that gap and kind of reduce some of their stress by pulling them along with you. So I love that. And Chris, I know you mentioned this kind of towards the beginning of the conversation. You guys sold a home, and then you had some extra money to invest in apartments. But pre-call, we talked about something with the 401k, but love for you to want to talk about how you came up with some of the capital for some of your investments.
Sure. So our first investment that Maricela and I did together was we closed about 5 days. I think it was 5 or 6 days before we got married, actually.
Okay.
And we came into that with 50-50 partners. We both brought the equity that we needed. And I used my 401k, my TSP, actually, military TSP. I was able to get a $50,000 loan from that to purchase an investment property. There's a separate loan that I would have been able to get had that been a personal property. I could have gotten a different loan that had a different payback period. But the interesting thing was that was the end of 2018. I think it had a 5-year payback period.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, if I remember right, it was 0% interest. So why not borrow against your money, right? And but as I mentioned, I retired September of 2020. Well, within 3 months of retirement, you have to pay that money back. And so that was a little catch that I wasn't expecting at first, but it was fine. I told you that the property in Pensacola that I had purchased, that I was the accidental landlord for, I had sold that in June and paid off the loan with the proceeds from that. And a little extra kick that I want to throw out for those military folks is a lot of people, they hear about when you buy a home and you live in a home for 2 years and you rent it for up to 3 more, you don't pay capital gains if you sell it within 5 years of ownership. For military people, if you live in it for 2 years, it's 15 years. And
Really?
that can be verified against the IRS website, irs.gov. I forget the publication name right now, but you have 15 years to sell it with no capital gains. So it's a huge difference.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yep.
I'm writing that. Yeah, man, that's amazing. And so, I've heard people call it different things, but the way I typically describe that is the 2 and 5 rule. So in the last 5 years, if you've lived in it and owned it for 2 out of those 5, and they don't have to be consecutive, then you don't pay any capital gains. But military is 2 and 15. So live in it for two years, live and own it for 2 years out of the last 15. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
it was a great little find that I try to share that anybody who's got a military background or has military people watching, I'd like to make sure to pass that info. But you have to have left that property because of orders. That
okay.
is the other thing I'll say. You have to have left because you were on orders on the way out.
Very cool.
Yep.
Yeah. I need to tell one of my buddies that, because he sells a property from when we lived in North Carolina, and it's not been 15 years, so need to let him know that. But anyway, yeah, no, thanks for that, Chris.
Absolutely.
Want to go back to the TSP a little bit, and for those of you that don't know, a TSP is a thrift savings plan. It's essentially the military's 401k is all it is. And so you took out a $50,000 loan from that. You typically have 5 years to pay that back, and you're basically paying interest to yourself when you take out a loan. You didn't have 5 years because you got out. So that's another nugget there of, if you're going to get out within 5 years, then just be cognizant of that. So you took out a loan from your TSP, bought a rental property with your almost wife at that point, about a week before you guys got married, and then you ended up paying that off. So that's just another way to get into properties. And, Chris, a lot of the audience is like, hey, real estate's great, but how do I afford it? And I really appreciate you being so transparent and showing, just, you can have money, you can use cash, but that's not the only way, right? And I know, actually, I want to transition a little bit to, you guys have an active deal that you're raising capital for, a 506C deal. And so for the audience, sometimes we don't talk about active deals because it's a 506B, which means you can't solicit it. You can't just talk about it publicly. You have to, you can only share that with friends, family, and people that you have a relationship with. But in a 506C deal, which is what this is, it's a different exemption with the government, but now you can talk about it freely. So Chris, I'd love for you to talk about that deal a little bit. And then also, besides just 401k loans or TSP loans, like, how else can people invest in that if they don't have the cash?
Absolutely. So I am going to kick it back to the 401k type of investor first.
Mhm.
So this deal it's a storage deal. It's going to be development. It is shovel ready. Sometimes you buy raw land, and I apologize if I'm talking quickly. I know that we're a little short on time on some of this. So um, sometimes you buy raw land, and then you go through the city processes. You get the architect, you get the developer, and all that to map it all out, and then you're what's called shovel ready, and you can move on to the next phase. Well, this property we're buying from somebody who's done all of that stuff. And so we're shovel ready. Day one, we can go in with the developer and just clear the lot and get started. So the plan is, in the overall, is about 14 to 15 months building. And then and we're leaving ourselves a little bit of grace period there, just in case anything happens along the way to slow it down. But the overall original plan was a 4-year hold that would double your money. However, our partner has actually found somebody who wants it from the minute we get the certificate of occupancy. They don't want us to lease it up. They want to take it over. And when you look at the value difference along the way, the biggest change in value from purchase to is building. Once you get that certificate of occupancy, that's actually the biggest gain on the property. Downside, no cash flow, because we're not going to have any tenants. We're not going to have anybody renting anything. But the good side is we're probably going to come close to a 50% return on the investment in 2 years by
Wow.
selling to them. So we can hold it for an extra 2 and double your money instead and 100% return, or we can get a 50% return in 2 years, and that gets your money working faster, because if you turn around and reinvest that somewhere else quickly, you can make that money continue to double or triple or whatever along the way, and you have multiple streams reaching out on that. And that's how people build wealth. Well, for those development phases, that's where I was going to say that, going back to the self-directed 401ks, you can, if you're no longer in the military or no longer have a job somewhere, but you have a 401k plan or a TSP sitting somewhere, there are custodians, and we've, like I mentioned earlier on the monthly webinar that we did, we had somebody come in, have a conversation about this, but they can transfer your money over within about 2 weeks. There's no tax implications because you would never touch the money. And then you can use that money to invest in someone else's deal. The big caveat that I want to make sure to point out is that you cannot be a general partner in a deal where you're using your TSP money or your 401k money. It can't be for used on a project for you or an immediate family. So that's just something to keep in mind. We have had some people who thought as a GP they could use their TSP money as their share of the money going in, and found out, oh, that had to be considered a loan instead. And so they had to pay taxes, or they had to do a withdrawal and pay taxes on it. So just wanted to point that out, and that was the difference in the project that I did, where I grabbed a loan. I did a loan rather than the actual money from the account. But so people can get involved with that through direct cash. You have your 401ks. Syndications, it's really tough to do a 1031, which is when you sell a property and you want to do tax deferment. It's tough to do a 1031 into a syndication, but not impossible. There is also something called a DST, I think it is, deferred DTS, I don't know, deferred taxes. I want to say it's a Delaware something trust, and it defers taxes in some way. That is an avenue that you can use. That's not a 1030. It's like a 1031. It defers those taxes, but it is something that you can go into a syndication with, and that's actually another person that we want to reach out to have on our monthly meetup to have a deeper conversation about that, because we don't know enough about it. We just fairly recently learned about those, and yeah, just want to be able to try to provide people other opportunities for being able to do things with their money that they don't necessarily have to take on the liability and the extra work of running it themselves.
Yeah, man, I love that. And I know you mentioned when I asked, why is real estate so attractive? You mentioned the location, the freedom of location, freedom of time, building wealth, but also save on taxes. And so that just goes to show there's so many ways to save on taxes while still building wealth. And passive investors get those benefits just like active investors. And so I go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and that's one of the other things about the development deals is your 401k. When you use 401k money, you don't get that same benefit, the tax benefit. Um, However, with the development deals, there isn't the cost segregation. There isn't that extra tax relief. It's just not there. There is some depreciation that you're able to grab, especially if we take and do depreciation 1 year and then sell it in the early part of the following year, then that's a possibility. But yeah, I like to try to open all the avenues for folks. I don't want any surprises when something happens, and so I apologize if I cut you off on something.
No, I love that. And I mean, you're just trying to help, just trying to educate. That goes back to the emails that I was talking about earlier, even before we started recording. There's just so much information that people can take some of it or take all of it. And, there's just a lot. You guys offer a lot of education out there. Man, Chris, I've had an awesome time talking to you. I know we're running up on time here, so want to ask you about a recent book that you've read that really stands out to you.
I'm going to say Teamwork by Natalie Dawson.
Okay.
And it really, there's a lot of solopreneurs out there that are working towards building a team in some way. And again, with syndications, it's a team thing, right? Um, but in order to clarify your message, I guess I'll say a little bit, make it more succinct, make it that it talks to your internal customers as well as your external customers, and your focused avatar or people that you want to speak with. It really helps you to develop those processes. If you take each chapter and just break it up, you can actually build a business that is going to be successful on a whole different scale than if you didn't implement some of those things. They literally have built in 4 years, I think it is, they built a $75 million business, like $75 million in revenue. And if I'm not mistaken, this year they're over 125. But they built it out of nothing, and just a plan and an idea and something that they in their minds they knew that it would work, and it was growing their systems and utilizing that teamwork process that has truly helped them grow like that. And so that's a huge impact to us.
That's awesome. Teamwork by Natalie Dawson, you said.
Yep.
Awesome. What can people expect to see from you and your businesses over the next few years?
Over the next few years, we are looking at um, we are looking to continue to grow on the syndication side. We expect that it'll be another year or so potentially before there's a lot of multifamily growth, a lot of multifamily opportunities, um, where people feel comfortable, I guess I'll say, but that goes along with the education that we're throwing out there. Um, but it doesn't mean that the deals that people find now aren't good deals. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. There are deals out there. People are able to negotiate to an amazing extent to make these deals work right now. That anything you're buying in the next year is going to be exponential growth in the couple of years after that. Think about 2020 and how it pitted and then grew so fast. And then now we're back down into a slump a little bit, and we're going to grow really fast again. So we expect that to really help expand our business. The accelerated biz coaching, we've got that virtual assistant agency. We're hoping to be able to help. Really, we want to be able to help. Syndicators is who we focus on, but we can also do just about any type of business assistance where you can't afford a full-time employee right now, but you also don't you to us you can't afford to be doing the $10 and $15 jobs either.
Yeah.
So for grabbing a VA for pennies on the dollar and having their assistance, it's just a matter of being comfortable with delegating. So we blended. We hope to be able to grow that business to be much larger, and our clients are very happy because we give business coaching for the first month. We give business coaching in that process so that they can feel comfortable with the delegation process, and we offer other support from our company VAs. We offer support to their VAs in the process. So we want to grow that and develop that to, I'm going to say, $1 million business in the next 2 years. Would love to be able to do that because that means that we're helping that many more people grow that much
Yeah.
faster. And then coaching wise, we'd like to develop that business as well. But our focus is still multifamily. And even though we're doing the mobile home parks and we're doing the self storage, it's our partners that are the bigger experts in those areas. We understand it, we know the concepts, and we're bringing the syndication side of the world to them.
Awesome.
So, kind of like us when we were doing our smaller portfolios, deals, singles and duplexes and stuff, um, we kind of help bring them up into the next level of the properties that they can purchase. And the mobile home parks and self storage are doing an amazing job right now of continuing the cash flow, where they don't have necessarily have as many tax benefits or in great abundance like multifamily does. But that's why we're over that way, is that helps to continue some cash flow. Multifamily helps to write it off.
Yep.
So it's a great little circle ecosystem of its own.
Love that. All right. And then what is the best way for people to reach out to you, Chris?
I'm gonna say at invest@upplex.com.
Okay.
Email is invest@upplex.com, and it's UP-PLEX. That's the easiest way to reach us. Of course, I've got Instagram it's at Pops REI. I'm just getting started over there, and so there's not a whole lot, but we'll get working on it. And we're utilizing our VAs to help us to recycle some of our content and stuff like that. So that'll be a nice little education platform for folks as well.
Awesome. And you mentioned Instagram. I believe you're on Facebook. Are you on LinkedIn?
I am Christopher
Okay.
Linger. Yep.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes. And then best website, you kind of touched on it, but is it up-plex.com?
That's correct.
Perfect.
up-plex.com.
Awesome. And Chris, thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome talking to you. I will say it probably for the 10th time, but to the audience, definitely reach out to Chris through anything he's mentioned and or in the show notes. And I mean, there's just so much content that they put out that it's kind of unreal. It's good content. It's not just garbage. A lot of good stuff that's put out. He mentioned Clubhouse and webinars and things like that as well. So he's a great resource. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to Chris. But Chris, thank you for being here. It's been great talking to you and learning from you. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Charlie. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to today's show, brought to you by H&K Investment Group, your home for passive investing. If you want to learn more about how you can invest with us, please check out our website at hkigllc.com. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our podcast. Please leave us a review to let us know how we are doing. Feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn or Facebook. As always, I'm your host, Charlie Hardage. Catch you next time.